Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Coding with Colt. As I always say, today is a great day to learn how to code. However, in this episode we're not going to do any coding. One of my great loves, along with Raspberry Pi and coding, is retro gaming. And we're going to kind of combine those loves today. I'm going to take you through the NESPi 4 Retroflag case, and we're going to take a look at how to build it, and then how to install Retropie and get everything up and running. So let's unbox this thing and take a look. I picked it up off of Amazon. It was, I think, $43, $42.99, plus I think I got free Prime shipping, so it was relatively inexpensive. Now, I've already got one of these that I run on a Raspberry Pi 3B+. I've been waiting for the Raspberry Pi 4 model to come out for just a while. And so they finally released it, I think maybe back in December or something like that. And so it comes, well, first of all, you get a really nice carry bag. Although I will admit that I'm not entirely certain I would ever use this to carry it around. Maybe I would, but you never know. And then let's see here. We get a HDMI adapter. And so this is to convert the, you know what, I never remember if it's called an HDMI Mini or HDMI Micro that's on the Raspberry Pi 4 to a full-size HDMI port. Let's see here. We got a couple little inserts here. And here's the box it comes in. What I really like about this one over the Raspberry Pi 3 is it's got this cartridge here. And what's really cool is that cartridge actually is an SSD case. So you can put in a 2.5-inch SSD drive, SATA SSD, and that's exactly what we're going to do when we build this. I'm going to put a 2.5-inch, 240 gigabyte SSD on here. And you can actually use it one of a couple of different ways. Way number one is you can boot directly from the SSD drive, so you don't have to have a micro SD card. Or you can use it to store your ROMs and games on, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to boot from a micro SD card, but I'm going to use the SSD to store all my ROMs and games. And you can see here that the case breaks out the 2 HDMI ports, audio port, power port, and LAN on one side. Comes with the power supply. And then on the front, well, let's just open it up and see. Here we go. All right, so comes with a power supply. I actually did not realize that when I bought it, so that's nice. You don't have to go out and buy a extra power supply. And let's see here. This thing puts out 5 volts, 3 amps, so that should be plenty for the Raspberry Pi 4. And let's see. Oh, here we go. So we've got the instructions here. And I'm going to take you through building this and installing all the software that you need. And so here's the case itself. There we go. Feels nice. On the front, we have a power LED. We've got a power switch, and on this one you're able to install what's called a safe shutdown script. And so when you press power, it will shut down the Raspberry Pi instead of just killing power. Got a reset switch. It breaks out a USB 3 and a USB 2 port on the front. Flips up just like a real NES. And then here is that SSD case, which acts as a cartridge. I just think that's incredibly cool. And let's see, I don't know if you can see that down there, but you can actually see the SATA connector way down there at the bottom. And so on the side, you got your micro SD card slot, just like on the other one, on the model for the Raspberry Pi 3. There's a little slot down here you can use to store your micro SD cards, etc. And then on the back, the HDMI ports. One thing I do wish that they had done, I actually wish that they converted these to full-size HDMI ports so you didn't have to have any type of an adapter. That's audio right there. So you got an audio jack, and then your power and Ethernet. And then this thing breaks open here. So let's see here. So this right here is one of the extenders for USB. Tools even comes with screwdrivers, so you don't even have to have your own screwdriver. And there's all the screws that we'll need to mount everything. Comes with a fan and heatsink, and that's really good because the Raspberry Pi 4 tends to run hot, and so this right here will help to keep it cool. And I plan on overclocking it to at least 2 gigahertz. And once again, I'll probably show you how to do that as we go through it. And then let's see here. Here on the inside is where everything hooks. So this is the Ethernet extension, which breaks out the Ethernet port. This also plugs into, that looks like a USB 2. And I think we've also got one that plugs in. Yeah, there it is. Well, no. Yeah, there it is. USB 3 all the way down here. It's stuck. Let me move that. So there's the USB 3. And this plugs into a GPIO to control safe shutdown, a bunch of other stuff. All right. So let's get situated, get set up, and I will take you through how to build this thing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and build everything. I've got everything laid out. Got my Raspberry Pi right here. This is Raspberry Pi 4. This is the 8 gigabyte model. You don't need the 8 gigabyte model. In fact, the 8 gigabyte model is probably massive overkill for Retropie. The 2 gigabyte model is going to be just fine. I don't think you'll see any type of performance benefits by going up to the 4 gigabyte or the 8 gigabyte model. I just happen to have this sitting around, so that's what I'm using. I got the bottom part of the case right here. The top part, the cooling fan, the cartridge, my SSD, and I just bought a 240 gigabyte SSD off of Amazon. I think it cost me about $25. And this is where we're going to store all of our ROMs on. You're going to need a SD card. I got a 256 gigabyte SD card here. For what we're doing, 256 gigabytes is massive overkill. Once again, it just happened to be what I have lying around. We're going to put most of our ROMs, or all of our ROMs, onto the hard drive. So we don't really need a giant SD card. Like a 16 gigabyte card will do just fine. Now, if you're going to put your ROMs on the SD card, you do need a fairly large one. I'd recommend a minimum of 32 gigabytes. It really just depends upon what systems you want, how many ROMs you're going to put on there. I can easily fill up 256 gigabytes or close to it with a number of ROMs. You are also going to need a SD card reader of some sort. They come in many different sizes and shapes. This is the one that I'm going to use. We don't need the SD card or the SD card reader right now, so we can put that aside. We'll need these when we go to install the software in the next step. So I'm just going to put those aside. Tools, you'll need a screwdriver. You might need a needle nose pliers for one particular step. If you got fat, clumsy fingers like I do, there's a step where you put together a small pen, and needle nose pliers help out a lot. I have my screws separated by what they do. The really long screws, thin screws, these are the bottom 6 screws that join the top half and the bottom half of the case together. You have 2 longer black screws, and those screws fasten the cooling fan and heatsink to the Raspberry Pi. And then you have a set of 4 screws, 2 small kind of panhead or flathead screws, 2 flathead screws, and then 2 shorter silver ones. And these are what join the cartridge together. And in fact, that's where we're going to begin assembly. I'm going to begin assembly with the cartridge, with the SSD, because it's incredibly simple. So the 2 halves of the SSD just pop off. And let me take this out of the package. I kind of pre-cut it. All right, you're going to put the SSD. This is the bottom part of the cartridge. Simply rest right in there. There's a couple little prongs in here. And there's screw holes in the SSD, and they simply line up. Then you're just going to snap the top on. And I've actually had some difficulty lining this up, but you're just going to line it up and pop it on. Let's try this again. All right. There we go. I think I got it that time. Okay. The larger screw holes are for the flathead screws, the 2 flathead screws, and they actually secure the bottom to the SSD. And then the other one. Oh, I've lost it. Don't have it. There it is. And then the 2 smaller silver screws go here, and they join the 2 halves of the cartridge together so that it doesn't come off on you. All right, there we go. Okay, this is done. We can now set it aside. We don't need it right now. We'll do it or take a look at it in the next step when we install the software. All right, I'm going to take my Raspberry Pi out of the box. Step number 1, when you're preparing the Raspberry Pi, is you need to put the thermal pads onto the heatsink. Excuse me, the CPU and the RAM. Now, I was actually hoping, and I did this before. I know my fat fingers and peeling the sticky stuff off would have been frustrating. But anyways, I was hoping that when you put the heatsink fan on, that it would make contact with the CPU and the RAM. Then I could use thermal paste, but you can't use thermal paste. There's quite a bit of an air gap between the heatsink and the CPU and RAM, and so you have to have these thermal pads in place. Okay, once you've got that done, you got the thermal pads in. What you're going to do is you're going to put it in. It's going to go in essentially. You're going to put the SD card slot to your right and face the case to your right, and it basically just slips in right there. What you're going to do, though, before you do that, is you have to hook up the USB. So this USB that's under is going to go in the bottom slot, okay, bottom slot of the USB 2. Okay, this is, USB 3. This is blue, and it's going to go into blue here, and it's going to go in the bottom slot. And that's important, as you'll see in a bit. Ethernet goes into the Ethernet slot. There we go. And finally, this one right here goes into the top slot. It's USB 2. You can see that white. And so it's going to go into this one right here on the top. And like I said, that's important, as you'll see in just a minute. All right. Now, just get this into place. And I had some difficulty. I kind of test built this before I built it. And it could be a little bit difficult, but I get it slid in there. Might have to do this off camera. All right, I think I got it. Let me do this off camera real quick. Okay, there we go. All right. So everything should line up. Your ports, audio, 2 HDMI ports right there. Should line up. Okay. Now we're going to put the heatsink on. And it simply goes right into place right here. And, gotta take the sticky stuff off the thermal pads. Ooh. There we go. Alright, let's try that again. So this goes on right there. Press down a little bit. Now you're going to take the 2 longer black screws, and they are going to go right here. and right there. Of those 4 screw holes, it's only got 2 of those black screws. Thought that was interesting. And so they just screw down. And we're just about done. There we go. Okay. This little wire is the one I was talking about that you might need a pair of needle nose pliers. It goes right in there in that little spot right here. And sometimes like I said, if you got fat fingers like me, it can be difficult to get in there. Oh, I think I got it. There we go. I got it. And route your fan right around here, just like that. There we go. The other thing you need to be aware of, if you're going to use the safe shutdown script, there is a safe shutdown switch right here. And just make sure it's set to on. So right now it's off, so I'll slide it over here to on. There we go. Alright, now I have to hook this up. Notice one of these tags has an outside, where it says outside. It needs to go to the outside of the case, and it goes right there on the GPIO. It also has a, might have to do this off camera. Oh, no, I got it. It also shows you that you should have these colors right there in the bottom row. Red, black, red, white. And you can see I've got red, black, red, white. Alright, now we have to do the top. That's pretty simple. You've got another USB 3, and it's going to go in that top USB 3 port. That's why it was important to put the other one in the bottom. Because if you put it in the top, you wouldn't be able to get this one in place. And this right here is the USB port that is going to control the SD or SSD. All right, it's going to simply snap together, and then you're going to put in your 6 screws for the bottom of the case. All right, I'm going to finish putting in the screws, and we will go through installing Retropie and then installing ROMs. Before we went and installed all the software and got everything up and running, I just want to show it to you completely assembled. One thing you might want to be aware of when you put it in these 6 bottom screws, they require a little bit of pressure to get them all in. Also, you should have your cartridge, and whether you put an SD card in it, or excuse me, an SSD in it or not, you can go ahead and slide it in there to make sure that it fits, and then close it. And now we're ready. Let's go and install the software. You're going to need your SD card, your SD card reader, and you're also going to need for setup, you're going to need some type of USB keyboard and mouse, and I'll take you through all of that as we go through installing the software and setting it up. All right, one or a couple other things before we go and install the software that I forgot to mention. Number one I wanted to talk about was the HDMI ports. It's a common mistake that people make on the Raspberry Pi 4. They're not used to it. They plug into the wrong HDMI port. If we're looking at the back of the case, okay, the back of the case, we want to plug into the HDMI port that is on the far left, the one that's closest to the edge of the case. And our adapter just plugs right in here, just like that. Common mistake that people make is they plug into the wrong HDMI port. They plug into that second HDMI port. They get no signal, and they think that something is wrong with their Raspberry Pi. But you must plug into the far left HDMI port. Also, installing the SD card. So let's see here. What did I do with my SD card? Oh, there it is. When you go to install it, just know that you're going to install it with the gold contacts up. So when I go to put it in, the gold contacts are up. And it just goes right in there at the time that after we install all of our software. Seems a little backwards, but that's the way it is. All right, the last thing I forgot to mention was there is something else you're going to need. You're going to need a SATA to USB adapter. What this does is it allows us to plug into our hard drive, our SSD, if we're using the SSD, and turn it into essentially a USB drive. And I bought this one off Amazon. I'll include a link down below. It was cheap. I can't remember. I think it was less than $20. Probably way less than $20. And so all it does is it plugs into the cartridge, just like that. And it now becomes a USB drive. And so we can plug this into a Windows machine or a Mac or even a Linux machine. And it becomes a USB drive, and we can drag or copy all the ROMs, all the games that we're going to be using. Okay, I think now we're finally ready to go and install the software. So let's head over to the computer and let's go install the software. Okay, at this point, we're going to write the Retropie image to your micro SD card. So what you need to do, you need to plug in your SD card reader if you have an external reader and insert your SD card into the reader. Now what we need to do is we need to download this Raspberry Pi imager. It's absolutely the best, the easiest way to install just about any operating system onto an SD card for the Raspberry Pi. So to get there, all you've got to do is go to this website right here, raspberrypi.org/software, or search Google for Raspberry Pi imager. And you're going to download the imager for whatever system you're on, Windows, Mac, a Linux system, Ubuntu, etc. You can even install it directly on a Raspberry Pi if you want to, and run it from there with sudo apt install rpi-imager. Once you've done it, I'm not going to go through the whole install process. You should run the installer. Run the installer. And once that's done, go ahead and run Raspberry Pi imager. So once you do that, this right here should pop up. And once again, at this time, you should have your SD card in the SD card reader. So we're going to choose what operating system to install. So you're going to click right here. And because I've already run this before, it's going to look a little bit different. Okay, yours will look like this. You're going to scroll down and find the Emulation and Game OS section. You'll click there. Then you're going to choose Retropie. Click there. All right, we have to choose the correct image for the Pi that we have. Because we're using a Raspberry Pi 4, we're going to choose the last image down here, which is RPI4/400. We're going to click that. Just going to verify, that we've got the correct operating system. And then we're going to choose our SD card. Be very careful. Now, this is incredibly good with, filtering out everything but SD cards. But just be careful that you're not, choosing your boot drive or an external USB drive that you have. So there we go. Mine's a 256 gigabyte multiple flash reader. And I'm going to click there, and then I'm going to click write. Existing data will be erased. So do you want to continue? Yes, because I know I've selected the proper SD card. This process here takes quite a while to do. What I want you to do, once it's done, eject it. Plug in your micro SD card into your NESPi 4 case. Hook up a external keyboard to it. Hook up your joystick to it, and hook up your HDMI. And we'll go ahead, power it on, and I'm going to take you through setting up all the software options on it, starting up and setting up your Wi-Fi and a couple other things. And then the final thing we're going to do is install some ROMs and test it out. One thing I did want to go over while we're waiting for this thing to write was thermal testing on the NESPi case. When I was building it, I had mentioned that I was a little bit concerned because there was quite a bit of an air gap in between the fan and heatsink and the CPU and the RAM. Now that air gap was filled by the thermal tape, but just barely. Mine just barely made contact. It didn't smush that thermal tape down or anything. So I was a bit concerned with the thermals. So what I did before I did all this is I installed Raspbian, just the straight Raspberry Pi OS at 1.5 gigahertz, the default speed. And I did a stress test on it. And we had decent results. After about 20 minutes of stress testing, running the CPU all out at 100%, maximum temperature was around 55 degrees, which is well under thermal throttle range. But in reality, not all that great. So I overclocked it to 2.2 gigahertz, and it was not good. Under normal load, it stayed, right around 50-something degrees, 55 degrees. However, once I stress tested it, it went all the way up to thermal throttle speed, 80 degrees, pretty quickly. So I dialed the overclock down to 2 gigahertz, and although it never hit thermal throttle speed, it did play with that speed a lot. It was right up there around 78, 79 degrees after 30 minutes of stress testing on it, and that concerns me. I've got another case that I did a test on. I'll put a link in the description below, called the NESPi Pro. And it's got a copper heatsink that makes direct contact with the CPU. And I was able to use thermal paste instead of a thermal pad. And overclocking my Pi to actually 2.3 gigahertz, about the fastest you can overclock a Raspberry Pi 4 8 gigabyte. Stress testing, I never hit above 60 degrees ever at 2.3 gigahertz, which is absolutely amazing. And so the NESPi 4 case has some, I consider it some minor thermal issues. Now, if you don't overclock it or put a mild overclock on it, it's probably going to be fine. But if you wanted to go up to 2 gigahertz, 2.2 gigahertz, it's not going to work on the NESPi case, the NESPi 4. Hopefully, maybe in the future, they can retool that heatsink so that it goes down a few more millimeters and makes contact with the CPU, or the air gap isn't as great so that the thermal paste actually gets, or not thermal paste, the thermal tape, thermal pads get smushed down a little bit, because mine barely made contact with even the thermal pad. So that concerns me just a little bit, because you won't be able to overclock that much on it. For most games, it's not going to make a difference, but it may make a difference on stuff like Nintendo 64, which the Raspberry Pi 4 overclocked at 2 gigahertz runs most Nintendo 64 games buttery smooth. There are a few games that does have issues with, but for the most part, an overclocked Raspberry Pi 4 runs Nintendo 64 stuff pretty well. But at 1.5 gigahertz, you may still have some stuttering and some issues. All right, this thing's almost done. I'm going to get it all set up and reboot and show you how to configure it and get ROMs on the thing. Okay, so here we are booting up for the first time. Right now, the only thing that you should have plugged into your NESPi 4 is a gamepad of some sort. Any USB gamepad controller will work. I've got a Logitech F310 plugged into mine. I was using a cheap, like, generic Xbox wired USB controller, but I really like this Logitech F310. Feels nice. Anyways, you should have it plugged into your monitor via HDMI, and you need to have a USB keyboard plugged in. You can actually use a wireless keyboard. Anything that uses a dongle that you plug into a USB port will usually work, but I prefer USB keyboards just simply because they are pretty much guaranteed to work. Do not have the SSD plugged in simply because we're not going to use it yet. What we're going to do first is we're basically going to set up a few things. We're going to set up our Wi-Fi, and we are going to set up our joypad, our controller, and we're going to set up what's called SSH access, or remote access to the system. When you first boot it up, the first time you boot it up, it gives some really strange behaviors. It almost looks like it's broken because it reboots at least once. And takes a little while. Just give it time. Eventually you're going to get to this welcome screen right here where you have to configure your gamepad. In addition, because we don't have the safe shutdown script in place, the power does some weird stuff. It takes a couple of seconds after you press the power button for the power to come on and it start up, but it will. And then the power light goes out and a few other things. So it's a bit weird until we get that safe shutdown script in there. But for now, we're going to configure our joypad, we're going to configure our wireless, and we're going to configure SSH. So let's get started. Joypad's really easy. Just hold down any button on your controller and it will detect it. And then just do what it says. Press those buttons, D-pad up, down, left, right. Start, select, and then A button is the east button, B button is the south button. It shows you on there. Some people like to swap the A and B buttons, but I'm not gonna. All right, left shoulder, left trigger, right trigger. If your controller doesn't have one of these types of buttons, just press anything and hold it down and it will skip it. Left thumb means clicking down on the left thumb, clicking down on the right thumb. All right, left analog, up, down, left, right, up, down, left, right. Hotkey enable. You must enable a hotkey if you want to be able to exit ROMs, which means you need to enable a hotkey. If your controller has an extra button on it that's not being used, I recommend that you use that as the hotkey. For example, my Logitech controller has a big, huge Logitech button right in the dead center that's not being used. So I'm going to use that as my hotkey. If you don't have an extra button, I recommend using your select button again. But I'm going to press that big button in the center. It detects it as button 8, and then I'm going to press OK. If something goes wrong as you're configuring, and it takes a couple of seconds to exit out after you press OK. If something goes wrong when you're configuring your joystick, just press the start button and then come down here to configure input, and you can do it again. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to enter into the Retropie menu. So what you'll do is press your select, or not select, press your action button, which is the A button, and then go to Wi-Fi. Now, what's going to happen is that it's going to tell us we don't have our Wi-Fi country set, and so it can't set up Wi-Fi. This is where we need to have our USB keyboard in place. So what we're going to do is we're just going to say yes. Do you want to launch Raspberry config now? I'm going to say yes. The tab key or the left and right arrow keys will switch back and forth. I'm going to select yes and press enter. And then I'm going to scroll down here to localization options. That's option number 5. I'm going to press enter. And I'm going to come down here to WLAN country set. So I'm going to set my wireless country and press enter. You can use page up and page down to scroll quickly to find your particular country. I'm in the United States, so I'm going to scroll down until I see the United States here. Skipped it. There it is, the United States. I'm going to press enter. Wireless LAN country set. And I'm going to press OK. So that brings me back to here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press tab and then tab again to go to finish. Press enter. It's going to ask me if I want to reboot. I'm going to say no. I don't want to reboot yet. All right, so now I can connect to Wi-Fi network. So I'm going to press enter to connect to the Wi-Fi network. It's going to give me a list of networks that it finds. I'm going to select my network. My network appears in here like 6 times. Let's try number 1, see if it works. All right, and then enter your passphrase. And press enter. Now this part here seems to take forever. After you press enter, it looks like nothing happens. But I guarantee you it is. It just takes a good 30 seconds, a minute, and then it's going to switch over to connecting. Now, there we go. And there we go. We connected to my wireless network. So what you need to do, you must write down this wireless IP address right here. For me, it's 192.168.86.116. Yours will most likely be different, but you must write it down. We're going to need that number in order to SSH into our system. All right, I'm going to press OK. So I'm going to highlight OK and press enter. And that's going to drop us back into... oh no, I'm sorry. I'm going to press. I'm going to press exit. I'm going to press exit. There we go. What was I thinking? Okay, now what we got to do is we got to set up SSH. So I am going to scroll up here to Raspberry config. Raspberry config allows us to set up a lot of stuff that's native to the Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to press my select button, or excuse me, my action button. And I'm going to come down here to option 3, which is interface options, and press enter. And then I'm going to come over here to option number 2, which is SSH. I'm going to press enter. It's going to give me a warning saying, if you got weak passwords, your security risk when SSH is enabled. I'm going to go ahead and hit yes. I can always disable it later after I'm done if you want to. I actually like to leave SSH up and running on my Retropie machine just in case I've got a SSH into it and, bring something back up or fix something. So I'm going to say yes. Would you like all right, SSH server is enabled. I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to hit tab a couple of times. And I'm going to hit finish. We're going to come back to the Retropie menu. All right, I think we've done everything. We have configured our controller. We have set up Wi-Fi. And we have SSH up and running. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch over to Windows. And we are going to SSH in and set up the safe shutdown script. And we're going to set up our SSD drive. So see you in just a minute in Windows. Okay, we're back in Windows, although this will work for Windows or Mac OS or even Linux, although I'm going to show you how to do it in Windows and give some hints on how to do it in Mac OS. The first thing you need to do is you need to download a terminal program, and we're going to use one called Putty, P-U-T-T-Y. So you're going to go to putty.org, and you're going to download, it says you can download Putty here. And you're going to download the Windows installer. For most people, it's going to be the 64-bit installer, because most people should be on a 64-bit machine at this time. So you're going to click there to download it, and then you're going to install it. I've already installed it, so I'm not going to go through any of that. The other thing that you need to do, the other thing that you need to do is you need to find the NESPi 4 safe shutdown script. So you can just Google NESPi 4 safe shutdown script, and it's going to take you to this GitHub. I will also put links for Putty and for the GitHub repository down below. All right. So you're going to scroll down. You don't want the Retroflag GPI case. That was the original one. Or that's actually the handheld one. You want the Retroflag Pi case. It says NESPi Plus, Super Pi, Mega Pi, and NESPi 4. And you are concerned with this line right here. I'll show you what to do with it in just a second. Let's start up Putty. So I'm going to type in P-U-T-T-Y to start it up, because I've already installed it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I have SSH selected here, and I'm going to type in that IP address that I had you write down. Remember, for me it was 192.168.86.116. And once again, I'm going to make sure I've got SSH installed, and I'm going to click open. My NESPi has to be on. I have not restarted it or rebooted it yet, okay? So I'm going to click open. It's going to give me a warning. I'm just going to say okay. I'm going to say yes. All right. Now it's going to ask me to log in. You're going to log in as Pi, username Pi, P-I. And then it's going to ask for password. The password is Raspberry, all lowercase, all one word, Raspberry. And I'm now at my prompt. What I'm going to do is that line, that wget line, I'm going to highlight it. And I'm going to press Control-C in order to copy it. Then I'm going to come back to my putty window, and with my mouse, right there on the command line, I'm going to right-click, and it's going to paste it in there for me. And then I'm going to press Enter, and some stuff is going to happen. And it says Retropie case installation done. Will now reboot after 3 seconds. And I'm going to click OK. So my Retropie is going to reboot, and we should have, good power options. I will say this: the first time I did this, when it got stuck on the reboot process, and I actually had to kill power manually and reboot it manually. So you might have to do the same thing. Now let's work on our SSD drive. So what I've got is I've got the cartridge that we made, and I have plugged in my SATA to USB adapter, and I'm going to plug it into my computer right now, and it should show up over here. So let's take a look. So let me go, yep, there it is. Now then, if it doesn't, or you need to format it, this is a little dangerous, okay, but if it's not formatted, and mine came not formatted, come down here to your search, and you're going to type in disk partition, disk part, P-A-R-T, and you get this create and format hard disk partitions. This is dangerous. You're going to want to know what you're doing. But I'm going to find that drive, and I'm going to format it. So for me, it's disk 1. I can tell it's my SSD because my SSD is about 240 gigabytes, and that's what this is. My main system is a terabyte, and that's what this is. So I can right-click, and I can format it. I'm going to call it Retropie ROMs, and I'm going to format it with NTFS. You might read that you need to format it as FAT32, but Windows doesn't actually allow you to do that for drives this large. There are ways to format it with FAT32, and the advantage of formatting it with FAT32 is that both Linux and I believe Mac will read FAT32 if you wanted to do that. NTFS is absolutely just fine, especially if you're just going to be using it on a Windows system. So I'm going to click OK. Formatting this volume will erase all the data. So once again, make absolutely certain that you are formatting the proper drive. So I'm going to click OK, and it's going to take a few minutes to format the drive. All right, I'm going to switch my monitor real quick, and I'm going to check and see if the NESPi has rebooted or if it's stuck again. Nope, it has rebooted. All right. Let's wait for, it looks like we have formatted. So now here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to this drive right here, Retropie ROMs. So I'm just going to highlight it, Retropie ROMs right here. Okay, after I highlight Retropie ROMs, that's my E drive, I'm going to right click in here and I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call it all lowercase, Retropie-mount. Must be exactly like that, spelled exactly like that, all lowercase, Retropie-mount. We're good to go. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to eject that drive. So I am going to eject it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide it into my rebooted NESPi. My NESPi is rebooted. I've checked, and it's on the Retropie screen. So I'm going to click that in place. It's now in my system. And by the way, you can hot swap it. It's just a USB drive, so you can eject it in and out even when the system's live. Okay, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back to Putty. And I'm either going to start up a new Putty session, but if you didn't close down the old one, what you can do, because I didn't close it down, right-click in the title bar and just say Restart Session. And we should... Nope, let me try restarting Putty. Okay, I'm back. What happened was I did have to reboot my system manually, just like I had to do the last time. So after I installed the safe shutdown script and it said it was rebooting, it never actually got through that reboot. So I had to do it manually. I did check safe shutdown script is working. It's just something with that first reboot after the safe shutdown script. So now I've got everything. I've got my cartridge inserted. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, once again, Putty back in, SSH back in. And I'm just going to make sure that it sees that cartridge. So there we go. So what I'm going to do, I'll log back in, username Pi, Raspberry as the password. So it should get mounted in a specific directory. I'm going to type in cd/media/USB. CD stands for change directory, and so we're going to go to the directory called media/USB. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you. Nope. I was hoping I could control the font size. But anyway, so I type in cd/media/USB, and I'm going to press enter. All right, now I'm going to type in ls, and I should see my Retropie mount, and there it is. We got it. It has seen our system. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to copy all of the subfolders that we put our ROMs in into this. But what we have to do is we've got to reboot it to do so. So the command to reboot is sudo reboot. Sudo stands for super user do, and it's going to reboot it. So once again, I've got everything in there, got my SSD drive, everything. I'm going to reboot it, and it's going to disconnect from here. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to wait for it to reboot, and we're going to reconnect. Okay, my system is completely rebooted, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, once again, I'm going to right-click right up here in the title bar, and I'm going to say Restart Session. And there it worked that time. So I'm going to log in as Pi, Raspberry as the password. Now I'm going to go back to that directory. So I'm going to cd/media/USB again. And type ls. ls stands for list. It's like dir or directory, shows the directory. And there's that Retropie-mount. I'm going to cd Retropie-mount. cd Retropie-mount. Press enter. And there, you see it has now copied everything that we need. We can now eject that SD card, or SSD, and that's what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up, and I can do this while the system is running. I'm going to take out my SSD card. And you'll now see it gets unmounted. I can no longer see the files that are there. Anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug it back into my Windows machine, or whatever machine I'm using. And we are almost ready. Okay. Coming back to here, if I go to Retropie ROMs, there it is. That's my E drive. And I double click in Retropie mount. There it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my ROMs in here. If I double click on ROMs, you can see I've got all these systems. Amstrad, Arcade System, Atari 800, 2600, Game Gear, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Nintendo 64, Neo Geo, all kinds of stuff. Now you'll notice there are no ROMs in here. You've got to get your own ROMs. I cannot tell you in any way, shape, or form how to get those ROMs. I will tell you that you need to follow all local laws for whatever jurisdiction that you live in. I will also say that I own physical copies of every single game that I'm about to show you today. So I've got a little ROMs folder. And let me see what I did with that. What took it? Did I put it in documents? I did. There it is, ROMs. Okay. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to open that up, and I've got some Atari 2600. I'm going to do Control A, Control C, and then I am going to put them into that folder. Retropie mount, ROMs, Atari 2600, Control V. Mine are not zipped. You'll oftentimes your ROMs will be zipped, so don't worry if yours are zipped and mine are not. All right, I'm going to go back. I've got some Nintendo 64. I got Mario Kart 64 and Super Mario 64. And so let's go back once again. Go back to that E drive, Retropie mount, and ROMs, and N64, and I'll press Control V. There we go. That's all we got to do. I'm going to eject it. I'm going to put it back into... I'm going to put it back in, and then I'm going to reboot. I'm going to reboot the system. Actually, no, I'm not. All right. I'm going to go back into NESPi, and I'll see you in just a second. I'm back. We plugged in the SSD into the SSD slot, and I'm now taking a look. Now, I actually had to reboot, but when you put games onto the SSD, you don't necessarily have to reboot the entire system. You'll notice my Nintendo 64 games showed up, but apparently when I copied over my Atari games, it didn't actually show up properly. That's okay. So what you do after you've copied over ROMs into the proper folders, you slide it back into the cartridge case, and you'll come over to here, and what you'll do is you'll press your start button, and you're going to come over to here to quit. But you're not going to restart or shut down. You're going to restart Emulation Station. And really restart, yes. And what that does is it doesn't reboot the entire Pi. That can take a while. It just restarts Emulation Station. You can see my Atari 2600 games have shown up. And so when I enter in Atari 2600, there they are. So let's scroll down and let's play one. So I remember when Pac-Man, so the Atari 2600 was my very first console I ever got. I think we got it somewhere around 1979. And I remember getting Pac-Man in 1981, and it was one of the most disappointing days of my life because the Atari Pac-Man was not anywhere close to the arcade version. So here we go. So I started it up by pressing my action button. I don't know if sound is going to come through, but we'll see. Press to start the game. All right, looks like we do have sound. All right. So I got so good at the Atari version of Miss Pac-Man, the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man, not Miss Pac-Man, that I could essentially play forever. Because after my initial disappointment with the game, I actually enjoyed it. And I could be found playing this game for hours and hours and hours. And I got good enough, like I said, to last forever. Obviously not anymore. Now, when you're ready to leave... Oh, that is terrible. It's hard to talk and play at the same time. When you're ready to leave a game... I'm going to eat some Ghost before we leave. There we go. All right. When you're ready to leave a game, remember that hotkey that you set when you were doing the controller? For me, it was my Logitech button. I said if you didn't have an extra button, use your select button. You're going to press that button and start at the same time, and that throws you back out to your game menu. Now you're going to notice there's no artwork or anything. I'm going to show you something. Press the start button and go to Scraper. Press your action button. And you can choose where to scrape from, but basically what this is going to do, I'm going to just come over to scrape now. And it's going to go through my two systems that I have games, Atari 2600 and Nintendo 64. I'm going to hit start. And it's going to look for artwork. So it's going to try to find artwork for these games. It may or may not find them. A lot of times it depends upon how the ROM is named. But there we go. Got Defender, and I like that one right there. That's the actual cartridge there. So let's I'll just use the box art. And then it's going to go to Demon Attack. That was a great game. Miss Pac-Man. Atari Pac-Man. Pitfall. Incredible game. River Raid was always one of my favorites on the Atari 2600. Space Invaders is another that I can nearly play forever. Same thing with Defender. And then what might be my favorite Atari 2600 game of all time, Yara's Revenge. All right, Mario Kart 64. Let's use that artwork right there. And Super Mario 64. All right, so now I'm going to press B to exit. Now I've got artwork. Much better. All right, let's check out some Nintendo 64. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to overclock this thing, and then we'll be done. All right, let's try out Super Mario 64. So I've got this at the base clock of 1.5 gigahertz. And you're going to see it actually plays pretty well.
It's me, Mario! Hello!
Let's create a new game.
Okie dokie!
Okay, so here we are running around. It performs extremely well. Even with the base clock of 1.5 gigahertz, it feels really nice. We're probably running right around 60 frames per second.
Yeah!
Not all N64 games are going to play very well. Some of them have graphical glitches. Some are better than the others. But overall, the Pi 4 can play Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 games pretty well. Alright, so the last thing I'm going to show you is how to overclock it. Overclocking is optional. It may improve performance on some games, so your mileage may vary. But I'll show you how to overclock it. Okay, final thing I want to do is show you how to overclock this thing and give you my final thoughts. Actually, I'll give you my final thoughts first, and then I'll show you how to overclock it. Overclocking is completely and absolutely optional. The NESPi case is only something like $42, I think it was, is what it cost me. And I really like it. I like the fact that it's shaped like a Nintendo Entertainment System, a NES from back in the 1980s. We had one, and I absolutely loved it, and the games on it are absolutely iconic. I like the fact that it breaks out all the ports onto the sides. I love the safe shutdown. I absolutely love the cartridge, the SSD shaped like a cartridge. That's absolutely cool, incredibly amazing. However, I have a couple problems with it. One minor, just a little kind of, the little minor thing, and that is I wish they had broken out the HDMI ports as full-size HDMI ports. And then my final one is the cooling potential of the case. I think there's some problems there. I reviewed a case a couple days ago, the NESPi Pro. It's not much more. It's $59, solid aluminum. Also breaks out all the ports. Also has not only a slot for a SSD, 2.5-inch SSD, but also has an M.2 slot that you can use. And it has an amazing cooler in it. I overclocked that thing to 2.3 gigahertz, stress tested it to no end, and I never got the temperature up above 55, almost 60 degrees. It never hit 60 degrees, not even close to thermal throttle. I mean, not even close. And 2.3 gigahertz is about the maximum you're going to get out of a Raspberry Pi 4. I'm sure there are people that have gotten more, but 2.3 gigahertz is pretty good. This one, I was very disappointed. Like I said, there's a huge air gap in between the cooler, the heatsink, and the actual CPU and RAM. Yes, there's a thermal pad in between there, but that thermal pad is barely the size of the air gap. So the thermal pad doesn't get smashed down. It doesn't make good contact with the CPU. And so the overclocking potential of this isn't that great. I had overclocked it to 2.2 gigahertz, and it easily made it up to 80 degrees and began to thermal throttle. So I did a 1.8 gigahertz overclock on this, and it got up to, as you can see here, 74 degrees, which is still below thermal throttle, but it's playing with that upper temperature range. So I wish that they would have, and I hope it's something that they work on in the future to get a little bit better cooling solution on this. But otherwise, I love it. I'm absolutely gonna put it in my game room, and it's gonna replace my Raspberry Pi 3B Plus system that I have. So I do think it's well worth the money at $42. Overclocking is completely optional. So let's get into it real quick on how to overclock this thing. Before we begin, first of all, before we begin, please, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel and you like the video down below, and leave me some comments. I am completely new at this. I want to get better. I want to get better tools, and I want to get better at this. So I would appreciate it if you like the video and subscribe to the channel. The channel is mostly about coding, but I'm probably going to mix in coding and retro computing and electronics all together, because those are my big passions, my big hobbies. The next coding video is almost going to, it'll be done hopefully tomorrow or the day after. I'm making a complete asteroids clone in Python, and I'll teach you how to go through all that. But anyways, let's get to overclocking. So the first thing you might need to do is you might need to update the firmware in your Raspberry Pi. So you will SSH in with PuTTY or whatever tool you're using, and you're going to issue the command sudo rpi update, rpi-update. Now then, you're going to get a warning. I've updated mine, so it's going to tell me it's updated. You're going to get a warning that says, hey, don't do this if your Pi is working fine. So my warning to you is this. Overclocking could easily break your Pi. It could brick it so it never boots again. It could void your warranty. And I am absolutely not responsible for that. Neither is, the Raspberry Pi Foundation. This is completely optional. You're doing it at your own risk. So sudo rpi-update, when you run it, it's going to update your firmware. I had to update the firmware in my Raspberry Pi in order to get it to take the overclock that I just put on it. Once you've done that, you can then issue this command, sudo nano /boot /config.txt. That's going to open up a text editor, and basically we're going to edit a configuration file. You're going to scroll down, and you are looking for a line that says uncomment to overclock the ARM. 700 megahertz is the default. Now, I've already overclocked mine. Oh, my alarm's going off. I've already overclocked mine. So mine looks a little bit different. Yours is going to look like this. Gonna look something like that without this other stuff down here. So anyways, all you're going to do is you're going to edit it. So you're going to put in this over voltage equals 8. ARM underscore freak equals 1800. That means it's going to be clocked to 1.8 gigahertz, 300 megahertz overclock, which is a significant overclock. And then GPU freak equals 750. Make it exactly like this. Exactly. Then you're going to press Control O. That stands for write out. And press Enter to keep the original file name. You can press Control X to exit. All you got to do now is reboot. Sudo reboot. And you're either going to reboot or you're not. If it doesn't boot all the way, doesn't get through the boot process, don't panic. Not a big deal.
What you'll do, remove the SD card, turn it off, remove the SD card, put that SD card back into your regular computer, whether it's a Windows machine or Mac or Linux machine. The file config.txt is going to be on the root directory of that SD card. Open it up and just simply reverse out the changes that you made. Just comment out those lines. And to comment them out, all you do is you put a hashtag in front of them. So you would just come down and put a hashtag in front of them. When you edit it, do not use a word processor like Microsoft Word or something. Use a pure text editor. Something like Notepad works because you want it to stay pure text. So edit that file, config.txt, change it back to the way it was, put it back in your Raspberry Pi. It should work just fine. All right, that's all I've got for you. Once again, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. I'd very much appreciate it. As always, today was a great day to learn how to code. Although we didn't do much in the way of coding today, I thought what we did was kind of fun. So until next time, keep coding. Bye-bye.